as basically in all the years we used to have a draw to make the order of the teams, but this year draw is not possible. So we have arranged the teams in alphabetical order. So the order is: Team A is IBGMEA, Team B is Medical College Kolkata, Team C is Arjikar Medical College, and Team 4 is School of Tropical Medicine. So just this, please pay attention again. I'll be repeating once again. Team A is IPGMER, Team B is Medical College Kolkata, Team C is Arjikar Medical College and Hospital, and Team D is School of Tropical Medicine. Congratulations to all of you, and we'll meet again in the quiz final, which is to start around 3:30 p.m. So now I hand over the mic to Dr. Shairi for taking forward the session. Thank you.
We move on to the next session. We are running a lot of time, so we'll be skipping the lunch time. Our next session is on cytohistology mixed bag. Our first speaker is Dr. Somnath Sarkar sir. He is currently the associate professor of Mathura Shambhavi Medical College. Has several public
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Should I start?
Yes, sir. Please start with.
Good afternoon to you all. Now, this is a histopathology session, and I will talk about the lip swelling. Now, all of you know that lip is one of the sweetest and beautiful part of the body. But as far as the clinical and the histopathology is concerned, the lip is little bit lacking in that. So many a case we are diagnosing the lip pathology as cheilitis, but that is a very vague term. And if you go for the histopathological examination or other investigation, you will get that the diagnosis is different from the cheilitis. So in my presentation, I will present 3 or 4 interesting cases of the lip pathology along with their histopathological features, and want to do a clinical and a histological correlation among them. Now, this is normal lips. Now, a simple question to the audience: whose lips are these? You can communicate with me in the chat box, and at the end of my session, I will announce the name of the correct answer givers, obviously if the time permits.
Sir, excuse me, sir. Sorry to interrupt you. So can you please make it a full screen?
Is it all right?
Okay, sir. Yeah, sir. Please
Is it all right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please proceed, sir.
Okay. So these are the normal lips, and obviously lip is the sweetest and beautiful part of the body. We want the lips like that, but sometimes it may not be. It becomes like that. In that case, the clinical intervention as well as the histopathological examination is required to pinch the exact diagnosis. Now, before going to the pathological part of the lips, we should know what is in the normal lips. What is the normal histology of the lips? Now, as you know, lip is a mucocutaneous junction, and if we go for a longitudinal section of a lips, you will get the pathological features that is all present in the skin. That is the keratin layer, granular cell layer, spinous layer, basal layer, and all the epidermal appendages and all this. Now we should know what is extra in the lips. What are the additional features that will present in case of the lip pathology? Now let us see on the histological section. Now this is a normal histological section of lips. Now you will well appreciate there is a keratin layer. The epidermis is a little bit thinned out. There is undulation of the retiridges and some plenty of structures present in the mid and the lower dermis. Now we have to see in the high power view what is the exact structures in this. So let's see what is in the high power. In the high power view, you will well appreciate there is orthokeratotic layer. The epidermis is little bit thinned out in the comparison to the other part of the skin. there is opening of the plenty of channels. Now in this arrow, you will see that there is a vascular channel that is lined by the single layer of epithelium cell. There is the lymphatics that is very much pronounced in lips. You will see a slit-like structures. This is a slit-like structures. That is actually the venules. And this is the arterioles. This is the arterioles. Now, here in the mid and the lower dermis, you will see there are some hexagonal cells. That is very unique in case of lips. This is actually the skeletal muscle cells that is present in the lips. These are actually the orbicularis oris muscle. Now, here is a structure that is a oval shaped structure. That is the mucus secreting glands, mostly the minor salivary glands. Here you will see there is a open little bit of whitish areas. That is actually the fat cells or fatty structures. In case of the normal histology of the skin, we will get these fatty structures or the funiculus in the lower part of the dermis. But in case of the histology of the lips, you may get it in the upper part as well. So these are the additional features, that is the prominence of the different vessels, arterioles, lymphatics, venules, presence of the orbicularis oris muscle in the mid and lower dermis, presence of the mucus secreting glands, and presence of the fatty tissue. And whenever there is any pathology in the lips, either these structures are exaggerated or that is replaced by the pathology concerned. Now, we'll shift to the pathological part. Now, in pathological part, I will present 3 interesting cases. Now, this is my first case. He is a 42-year-old male patient presenting with the asymptomatic swelling of the lower lips of 2 years duration. All the other histories are non-contributory and all the laboratory investigations are within normal limits. After that, we will proceed for the histopathological examination. In the low power histology, you will well appreciate there is orthokeratotic layer, the granular cell layer is pronounced, there is nothing in the spinous layer, the basal cell layer appears to be normal, and there is plenty of vascular channel. Most probably, these are the lymphatics in exaggerated form. And there is multiple round cell infiltration in the mid and the lower dermis. Now we have to find that what is that round cell infiltration that is present in the mid and the lower dermis. So let's move on to the 40x view. In 40x view, this is quite evident that there is prominence of these lymphatic channels. This is lined by the single layer of cells. And more interestingly, you will see there are appearance of plasma cells. This is the plasma cell. You will well appreciate that is a signet ring shaped cells. So there is multiple infiltration of the plasma cell. I'm giving one picture in the inset. Now you can see that arrow, that signet ring shaped cell. So that is plasma cells. So that is a case where the epidermis is absolutely normal and there is predominance of lymphatic channels along with proliferation of plasma cells. So we diagnose this case as plasma cell cheilitis, and this was reported in the Indian Online Journal of Dermatology. Now move on to my next case. In the second case, he is a 50-year-old male patient presenting in the swelling of the central part of the lip. Only the central part of the lip is involved. Other the lateral part of the lips and in the lower lips are absolutely free. And this is recurrent and asymptomatic. And there no other histories are non-contributory and all the laboratory investigations are normal. After that, we will proceed for the histological examination. Now let's see what is in the histological examination. Now this is the scanner view. You will appreciate the epidermis is thinned out. There is a little bit of keratin layer. The pathology may be concentrated over here, maybe over here. On the scanner view, it is quite evident that there are certain small roundy structures in the lower part of the dermis. Next, we will move on to the 10x view. In 10x view, it is quite evident there is similar structures that is present in the dermis. The morphology of the cells in these structures are not evident in the 10x view, but it is quite evident there is monotonous repetition of the same structures. Now, whenever you get in the monotonous repetition of the same structures, one differential diagnosis that is come our mind, that is the sarcoidosis. Now let's see what is in the 40x view. In 40x view, it is quite evident there is monotonous repetition of granuloma. There are multiple granulomas and there is lack of lymphocyte. I am giving the picture of one granuloma in an inset, and that is quite evident there is lack of lymphocytes. So monotonous repetition of the granuloma with lack of lymphocyte, all of we know that is a naked granuloma. So this case was diagnosed as granulometastylitis due to sarcoidosis. Now this is my third case, a 52-year-old female that is presenting in the swelling of the lower lips, that is absolutely asymptomatic. On examination, we found some erythema and scaling. That is a shorter duration of period. The patient presenting within 2 to 3 weeks. All other histories are non-contributory, and all the laboratory investigations are within normal limits. Then we will proceed for the histological examination. Now let's see what is in the histology. This is the scanner view. Now you will well appreciate the epidermis appears to be normal, granular cell layer appears to be normal. The pathology may be concentrated over here, maybe over here, maybe over here, maybe over in that part. Now, after that we go going for the 10x view. In the 10x view, let's see what is there. Now, in the 10x view, it is evident that this is orthokeratosis. Granular cell layer is little bit thickened. Spinous cell layer is within normal limit. There is no basal cell degeneration. And in the 10x view, it is evident that there is clumps of certain cells and there is some channels. There are some little channels, maybe vascular channels. We have to see in the 40x view what is in that section. So further we will proceed for the 40x view. In 40x view, it is evident this is one of the clumps of cells. I have focused that there is thickening of the vessel wall and there is infiltration of the cells. And in the inset, I have given the larger view of that area. We'll see the thickening of the vessel wall along with the proliferation of neutrophils along with lymphocytes. Maybe we have done this histopathological examination a little later. That is why along with the neutrophils, we got the infiltration of lymphocytes. So we diagnose this case as a neutrophilic vasculitis of the lips. Now, if we want to do the clinical and the histological correlation among these three cases I have presented, this is the first case, is presenting with the swelling of the lower lips that is absolutely asymptomatic. The clinically it was diagnosed as granulometastylitis. But on histology, we found that there is predominance of plasma cells. So it was diagnosed as plasma cell cheilitis. In the second case, there is a recurrent swelling in the central part of the upper lips. We diagnose this case as angioedema. Many of us, we diagnose as the case as angioedema. We'll give the antihistaminics, but the swelling recurs. On histopathological examination, we found that is a case of granulometastylitis, probably due to sarcoidosis. In the third case, that is a asymptomatic swelling in the lower lips with mild erythema and scaling. Many of times we have experienced that this case was diagnosed as actinic cheilitis. Many of us will diagnose that as a case of actinic cheilitis. But on histology, we will get the neutrophilic vasculitis. Though the exact cause of this neutrophilic vasculitis in this patient was not delineated, we have to investigate the patient further to fetch out the exact cause. This patient is under our follow-up, and we will see what is the exact cause of this neutrophilic dermatosis. So from this presentation, it is evident that there is poor clinical and the histological correlation in case of lip swelling, and histopathology should be done in case of lip swelling whenever there is any confusion. And my advice to the audience and all our students, that don't diagnose cheilitis in your diagnostic pad. Be specific and try to fetch out the exact pathology because I have said you earlier, the lip is little bit untouched part as far as the clinical and the histopathology is concerned. So with this, I must thank the organizers and the scientific committee and the organizers for giving me this opportunity to talk on this session. And thank you, audience, for your patient hearing. Thank you. And last of all, many of you giving me the right answer of my question, what are the normal lips? So I must give a big clap to them. And lastly, again, thank you, organizers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a very informative session. Thank you. We'll move over to the next one. Our next speaker is Dr. Joyita Chaudhary, madam. She is an MD gold medalist, currently Associate Professor of Neelratan Sarkar Medical College. She takes keen interest in publications and research work. She will be speaking on T-Zank smear, an old yet efficient OPD-based diagnostic tool. Over to you, madam, whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Shairi. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So thank you, Team Mid Curicon, for giving me this opportunity to share this screen on a very old topic, that is Zank smear, but yet it's very much apt and relevant even in today's world. So with this, I'll be moving on to my main topic. So cytodiagnosis, we know, is being used in many branches of our medicine as well as in dermatology. Now, though nowadays many new investigations have come up, but yet we cannot ignore the old things because they are still very much apt in our clinical diagnosis, especially coming to Zank smear. We know that this is very important because we deal with cases which are very confusing clinically, like pemphigus and between herpes and also between SJS10. And in those cases, we cannot wait for a long term, like at least for 7 days a biopsy to come, because we have to start the treatment earlier, as there are two different branches of treatment for the two different diseases. So for that reason, Zank smear is still so much apt in our clinical OPD. So cytodiagnosis, as we all know, it is an aid to the rapid diagnosis of numerous skin conditions. And it was George Papanicolaou, the scientist, who first introduced this thing in our medicine. Now, how a Zank smear is prepared, that we should know first. As we know that we should select a fresh blister of the patient. By using a blunt scalpel blade, we gently deroof the lesion. We fold the roof, and then we scrape the base of the lesions. Then we smear the tissue onto a clean microscopic slide, and that should be a very clean slide. That is very important. Otherwise, when we go to see the under microscope, then we get a lot of artifacts. Then we should allow it to dry in the air. We fix the specimen with a preservative. So these are the steps, as we all know, we all perform in our OPDs. So the staining, it can be stained by a variety of methods. Most commonly that we do in our OPD, in our indoor, is with a Giemsa stain. Otherwise, quick staining can also be done by Hamarochlori and Diff Quick with a minute. H&E stain, even Leishman stain can also be used. So what is this Giemsa stain? A bit one line about it. It's a solution containing azure-2 eosin, glycerin, and methanol. And the stain is composed of methylene blue eosinate, azure A eosinate, azure B eosinate, and methylene blue chloride. So Giemsa stain, we actually, after 15 minutes, we wash it off with sterile water, and then we allow it to dry, and then we see it under the microscope. With toluidine blue, it is more easier. It requires only 1 minute. So what are the indications? Like in Zank smear, what do we get in different sorts of diseases? So mainly, most importantly, it's used in immunobullous disorders, most commonly for pemphigus vulgaris. So many a times we see that in our OPD, we cannot distinguish between whether it's a case of pemphigus vulgaris or bullous pemphigoid. So it's within 1 hour, within 30 minutes, we are getting a result which can actually help us counsel the patient about the gravity of the situation and about the long-term treatment plan. So in the immunobullous disorder, we know that in pemphigus vulgaris, we get acantholytic cells. In BP, we won't get any acantholytic cells, but we'll getting a lot of leukocytes, especially the eosinophils. In 10, we'll be getting necrotic basal cells, and this is very important and on the OPD basis diagnosis. Then we see in infective cases, we'll be coming in details in the next slides. We get in leishmaniasis, we get the LD bodies. In genodermatosis, especially in Hailey-Hailey disease, we get the acantholytic cells. In cutaneous tumors, especially BCC, this really helps us a lot by seeing the clusters of basaloid cells. So these are the different things in which we use it. So first, coming to the most important thing, that is in pemphigus vulgaris. Now we know that pemphigus vulgaris is one of the most acute skin conditions where we need to, in most of the cases, we need to admit the patient and we need to seriously treat the patient because it's a very grave disease. So here Zank test is a very use for the diagnosis, particularly in the early stages of oral pemphigus, where a biopsy is uncomfortable for the patient and some little help in clinching the diagnosis, especially in oral pemphigus. And here it reveals multiple acantholytic cells, the Zank cells. In pemphigus vegetans also we get these cells, but here we get more inflammatory cells with the Zank cells, that is the eosinophils. So what is a Zank cell? It is actually in the process of acantholysis, where there is loss of coherence between the epidermal cells. There is a breakage of the intercellular bridges. So the cells, they no longer maintain their pattern. So they become rounded, resulting in intraepidermal clefts, vesicles, and bulla. So a typical Zank cell that we need to know that what we are looking for. If we do not know what we are going to look for, we will never be able to understand or interpret the Zank smear. So a typical Zank cell is a large rounded keratinocyte with a hypertrophic nucleus, hazy or absent nucleoli, and abundant basophilic cytoplasm, which is deeper peripherally on the cell membrane due to cytoplasmic condensation at the periphery. And the basophilic staining is deeper peripherally on the cell membrane, that is a morning edged appearance due to the cytoplasm's tendency to get condensed at the periphery, leading to a perinuclear halo. So this is a basic fundamental thing that everybody should know before doing a Zank smear. So this is a typical Zank cell that we find in pemphigus vulgaris. There's a certainly rosette cell appearance of the epithelial cells at the periphery of the Zank cell. These are you can see that there is loss of the coherence and the cells have become rounded, you can see. So these are the rounded, and this is an artifact. So these are the rounded cells. So here you see that the rest cells of the epithelioid cells are maintained, but here the cells have become rounded. Here we can see that in case of pemphigus, we see that there's a hyperchromatic nucleus we can see, and the peripheral condensation we can see. In case of oral pemphigus, you can see lots of Zank cells. So it's very difficult to do oral biopsy and to get the results very early. So here also oral pemphigus, to distinguish especially from SJ10, is very helpful. In case of pemphigus vulgaris, we definitely get the acantholytic cell, but we get more hyalinized cytoplasm that corresponds to the disc keratosis sections in the histopathology. Now coming to the bullous pemphigoid, so many times we need to distinguish between bullous pemphigoid, and sometimes bullous pemphigoid in the healing stage, they come with a flaccid bulla and all. So it's very difficult to understand. At that time, we can again do the Zank smear. It's a very easy step. And here what we see is that there are a lot of eosinophils without any acantholytic cells. You can see the eosinophils that without acantholytic cells. There is no acantholytic cell present in the Zank smear. So only eosinophils are present. So cytological examination in bullous pemphigoid, in many studies, they have revealed that 70% cases, there are numerous neutrophils and acantholytic cells. Okay. So giving a sensitivity of about 85.7% and 66.6% specificity. In studies by Farhan et al., the Zank smear sensitivity was found to be almost 81.8% compared to 85% of histopathology. So that's a big thing, because before getting the histology reports, even an 81% sensitivity is very high and very important in helping us treat the patient. Now coming to the SJ10 and Staphylococcus aureus skin syndrome, here also in very young patients, sometimes it's very difficult to understand whether it's an SSSS or whether we are dealing with a case of 10. So here the cytological examination in case of 10, they show a lot of scattered inflammatory cells, necrotizing and degenerated basal cells, which are not found in case of SSSS. Now coming to the second section, that is about the cutaneous infections. So most commonly what we use is in case of herpes. Now many a times it's not possible to distinguish between whether it's case of herpes simplex or we are dealing with varicella or varicella zoster, but still we can at least appreciate that yes, it's a case of herpes, it's not pemphigus. So this should also be done in a very fresh, the most freshest vesicle that we get is ideally within 3 days old. And here The typical features we see is multinucleated syncytial giant cells and acantholytic cells, and the cells, they appear as if they have been inflated. That's a ballooning degeneration, and sometimes may grow tremendously, almost to about 60 to 80 millimeters in diameters. And the giant cells often have a tadpole, bipolar, irregular teardrop shape, the smooth external contour, in sharp contrast to the jagged configuration of sheets of abraded normal squamous epithelial cells. So these, we can see that the multinucleated giant cells with ballooning degeneration, the same thing we see with the multinucleated giant cells with ballooning degeneration. They are so much out of proportion to the rest of the epithelial cells at the surroundings. Now, this is in case of herpes zoster also. Here we can see that the bland inclusion containing nuclei against these things. These are the nuclei in comparison to the cytoplasm present in the periphery. So viral infections like herpes simplex are usually diagnosed clinically, but at times the clinical features may overlap with those of the other venereal diseases of genital aphthous ulcers. So in such case, Zancks smears are really helpful, and it has been found that their efficiency is almost comparable to the other PCR and indirect immunofluorescence techniques. So from a study done outside India, they have found that in case of viral infections like in varicella, the positivity of serology has been almost 26%, whereas Zancks smear is 21%. In case of herpes zoster, it's 14%, and in case of Zancks smear is almost 18%. So we can see that it's almost comparable. The cytological smear is almost comparable with the serology. So it helps us in giving a first-hand diagnosis. Not only in herpes, we can also get good results of Zancks smear in case of molluscum contagiosum. Now, molluscum contagiosum is usually a very clinical identity. Okay, you have to diagnose it clinically, but many a times we cannot distinguish between a milia and a MC, especially when there is no umbilication. In those cases, Zancks smear is very helpful. You can see that here a lot of squamous cells are there, and the Zancks smear that is showing is these small they are actually the Henderson-Patterson body. They are correlating with the Henderson-Patterson body. Now, this is a case of candidiasis, where you can see a lot of yeast cells that are present in Zancks smear. So many a times, even in candidiasis and and especially with distinguishing it from Hailey-Hailey disease, first-hand Zancks smear can definitely help you delineating or the differential diagnosis. In case of leishmaniasis also, cytology is very helpful, but it is only in case of acute, not the chronic one. So in acute leishmaniasis, we'll be seeing that the protozoa are usually grouped together in a swarm of bees fashion and within a large macrophage. It's known as a Wright cells. So this is what we see in the Zancks smear in case of leishmaniasis. Now, in case of bullous impetigo, we get in children many a times. Here also, if we do a Zancks smear, we can see a lot of numerous neutrophils in bullous impetigo. There is no bigger neutrophils we can see. Here also, we can see there are a lot of neutrophils without any Zancks cells in case of bullous impetigo. So this is in short about the different infected diseases where we can find in case of pemphigus vulgaris. Here we see in case of herpes simplex. So these are in a single window, all the results are given. The last one is about the cutaneous leishmaniasis. Now, other than the infective diseases, in ICD also, in irritant contact dermatitis, in many studies, they have got the tadpole-like cells in case of ICD. So sometimes it's not, sometimes it becomes difficult that whether it's a case of tinea manum or whether it's a case of irritant contact dermatitis. Here you can go for a Zancks smear, and in few cases, you may find these tadpole cells. Coming to genodermatosis, especially in case of Hailey-Hailey diseases, where this Zancks smear is very helpful. You can delineate from the candidiasis. In candidiasis, you'll be getting the yeast cells, whereas in case of Hailey-Hailey disease, here you get the acantholytic cells. These are the acantholytic cells that you'll be getting in case of Zancks smear of a Hailey-Hailey disease. Then coming to the different tumors, especially coming to the BCC. Now, recently, a lot of studies are going on for with Zancks smear for basal cell epithelioma. Here, which shows clusters of basaloid cells, some of which may exhibit retention of peripheral balisading as in the histology. And the basaloid cells, they look like normal basal cells, except for being a little larger and more deeply basophilic. They're uniform sized, elongated, and have a central oval, intensely basophilic nucleus, which occupies almost maximum of the cells. And the cytoplasm is very poor. Here, you see the Zancks smear of basal cell carcinoma showing a cluster of small, very small, tiny oval basaloid cells with hyperchromatic. You see, these are hyperchromatic nuclei and the thin rim of cytoplasm. The thin rim of cytoplasm, again, that is around the hyperchromatic nuclei. And the peripheral cells, they are arranged in palisades. So you see the palisading pattern, they are present in the Zank smear. So the results that show is that in case of some different subtypes of BCC, the positivity of Zank smear has been highest in case of nodular BCC. Okay. In case of squamous cell carcinoma also, in few cases, hypertrophic, hyperchromatic, lobated and multiple nuclei and abnormal mitosis cells have been found. In Page's disease, you can see the Page's cells on Zank cytology. They occur in single or in small groups and are round to oval cells with amphiphilic vacuolated cytoplasm and a hypertrophic nucleated nucleus. In case of erythroplasia of curate, we can give the poikilokaryosis, that is a nuclear morphonism relating to the size, shape, and the staining. So overall, the sensitivity and specificity of Zank smear in different diseases, you see in viral infection, the sensitivity is very high, 86% almost, and the specificity is 91%. In bacterial infection, it's almost comparable, but the specificity is a bit low. In pemphigus vulgaris, the specificity as well as the sensitivity is very high, almost 83%. In bullous pemphigoid, the specificity is almost 100%. So it definitely helps rule out the other diseases. And in genodermatosis, the specificity is not there, but the sensitivity is almost 100% in case of Haley disease. So, but there are definitely a lot of pitfalls in Zank smear. It's not the golden gold standard for diagnosis. There are a lot of things that definitely it gives. Sometimes it may mislead. For example, in case of, it's very difficult to differentiate the dyskaryotic cells observed in LP with that of FDE. Okay, so here, in those cases, it's not possible to rely totally on case over Zank smear for the diagnosis. For example, you see in these cases the presence of dyskeratotic cells and occasional acanthotic cells in fixed drug reduction in Zank smear. But in histopathology, it is showing that this is basically having interface dermatitis with vacuolar degeneration. So ultimately, the diagnosis came out as LP. So here, Zank smear has not been of any help. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of this early diagnostic method? First of all, the advantage is that its initial results from a Zank smear should normally be confirmed by other techniques, that is such as biopsy or PCR. That is definitely mandatory. It's not the only or the solitary method of detecting a disease. That is should always be accompanied. But the advantage is that it is inexpensive. It results in minimal discomfort to the patient. It is quick, useful for initial evaluation or when rapid diagnosis is required or in recurrences of diseases. So the faster the diagnosis, that helps in early initiation of a treatment. But the disadvantage is that it requires expertise. Definitely, you need to see a lot of patients. You need to do a lot of things to ultimately set your eyes for what you're looking at. It is difficult to prepare the slides sometimes, and the interpretation of the cytology and false negatives may definitely happen in very early or in very late disease. So with that, I would like to end to my discussion about the Zank smear. Hope that this presentation is specially for all the PGT students. Definitely, no matter you go for histopathology or whatever, do not forget about this Zank smear, this simple method, because you cannot wait for almost 7 days or 10 days for to distinguish between whether it's a case of Sjösten or you're dealing with a case of pemphigus vulgaris. So whenever you are getting an option to do investigation for these patients, do always perform this Zank smear. With that, I would like to enter my discussion, and I would like to thank the total MIT Cuticon team for inviting me for this session. And definitely this MIT Cuticon is definitely going on to be a very good grand success, and congratulations to the team Cuticon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joyita madam. It was a very engaging session. A lot of information to take home too, definitely. We move over to the next speaker, Dr. Shrosti Mohanty madam. She is the assistant professor of ERA's Lucknow Medical College and takes keen interest in clinical dermatology and dermatopathology, and has several publications too. She will be speaking on skin, a mirror to the system. Over to you, madam. Whenever you are ready, you can start with your presentation.
Can I start now?
Yes, ma'am. Start with the slideshow.
Okay. First of all, good afternoon all. First of all, I would like to thank the organizing team MidCuticon for giving me an opportunity to speak in this session. I would discuss two interesting cases where skin lesions confirmed with histopathology has guided us in reaching at a systemic diagnosis, and hence my topic, skin, a mirror to the system. Now coming to the first case, we had a 30-year-old female who presented to us with multiple raised skin lesions over both palms, soles, and left elbow since 2 years. She also had fever on and off since 1 year, and there was pain involving bilateral knee, wrist, and small joints of hand. On examinations, as you can see, there were multiple erythematous to hyperpigmented papules and nodules with a smooth surface. Some of the lesions over the toes, they were eroded with crusting. The lesions were tender and firm to touch. Keeping xanthoma, erythema elevatum diutinum, rheumatoid nodule, and cutaneous metastasis as differentials, we proceeded with a skin biopsy. The biopsy shows a dense nodular infiltrate. As you all can see, this nodule was seen in the dermis with intervening areas of fibrosis. On higher magnification, the dermal nodule consisted of dense neutrophilic infiltrate. These cells are the neutrophils seen as polymorphic nucleus can be identified in both the slides. There was a dense neutrophilic infiltrate along with nuclear dust, lymphocytes, few eosinophils, and many vessels. You can see these structures are all vessels. All these round structures that you see throughout the slide are vessels. These vessels suggest new angiogenesis. Also, there is thick fibrosing collagen bundles in storiform pattern. You can appreciate the pattern of the collagen bundles. They are arranged in a storiform pattern here. This ribbon-like thickening of collagen surrounding the vessel is indicative of chronic inflammatory process. And when going on further high power of 40x, we can see lots of neutrophils and fibrin deposition around the vessels. These are the pink structures are fibrin deposited around vessels, and these are the polymorphonuclear cells, the neutrophils. So histopathologically, we arrived at a diagnosis of chronic fibrosing leukocytoclastic vasculitis, which is nothing but erythema elevatum diutinum. Since erythema elevatum diutinum is associated with HIV, SLE, Sjogren and other connective tissue diseases, also lymphoma, IgA monoclonal gammopathy, multiple myeloma, we further proceeded with investigating the patient. The biochemical tests were with a normal limit. HIV serology was non-reactive. ANA profile was also negative. The serum protein electrophoresis had an M band for IgA labra type. So we arrived at a diagnosis of erythema elevatum diutinum with IgA monoclonal gammopathy. We started the patient on dapsone after baseline investigations and referred to oncology for further evaluation and management of a gammopathy. Now coming to the second case. We had a 68-year-old male from Bihar who presented to us with multiple asymptomatic skin-colored raised lesions over the right leg since 1 year. The patient gave a history of filariasis in the right leg since 30 years with intermittent swelling of the right lower limb. He was a known case of multiple myeloma since 2 years. He was treated for the same with chemotherapy 8 months back and was declared treated case of multiple myeloma and was asked for regular follow-up for his condition. After 4 months of follow-up, he noticed tiny nodules with which he presented to our OPD. On examination, the nodules were skin colored to erythematous, shiny, firm, non-tender, and they're present over the right limb on the medial aspect of right thigh and leg. The left leg, as you can see in the picture, was totally spared. the lesions were exclusively present over the right limb, which was involved in filariasis as well. It can be seen as diffuse swelling of the limb with induration. And on examination of the inguinal lymph nodes, the right inguinal lymph nodes were enlarged as well. So we came to a clinical diagnosis of cutaneous metastasis, lymphangiosarcoma, hystoid Hansen's porotrichosis, and we proceeded with a skin biopsy from the nodule over the right leg. It showed dense, diffuse, infiltrative, somewhat monomorphic cells. If you can appreciate in this picture, there is a dense, diffuse infiltrate of monomorphic cells occupying the whole of dermis, extending up to the subcutis. As far as we can see till the depth of the slide, the entire tissue is involved with the monomorphic cells. This suggests that it could be lymphoma, leukemia cutis, or plasmacytosis, because the pattern is infiltrated. The cells have infiltrated into the collagen bundles, but at the dermoepidermal junction, the infiltrate tends to spare the epidermis and papillary dermis, forming a Gren zone. The pathology lies in the dermis. On further magnification, we can see monomorphic dense infiltrate of plasma cells. We can identify these cells as plasma cells, seeing the eccentrically placed nucleus in a dark blue cytoplasm. This makes the picture more clear. The cells were identified to be plasma cells and they were monomorphic. So a diagnosis of plasmacytoma was made. And cutaneous plasmacytoma, it is a very rare finding, and it could be a manifestation of multiple myeloma or plasma cell leukemia. Also, there are some infections, atypical infections with the dense plasma cell infiltrate like syphilis, Lyme's disease. But in our case, the diffuse infiltrative pattern of the cells and clonality studies, which were done later, helped us to reach at the diagnosis of plasmacytoma. Then we further proceeded with investigations like chest X-ray, where we found destructive changes in the 7th right rib of the patient. The CT scan showed lesions in the ribs, iliac bone, sacral ala, acetabulum, sternum, and on serum protein electrophoresis, the M band was positive with increase in the kappa chains. Also, beta-2 microglobulin of the in the serum of the patient was raised. So we arrived at a diagnosis of the relapse of multiple myeloma in form of metastasis in lymphadematous limb. This is also known as secondary cutaneous plasmacytoma or metastatic cutaneous plasmacytoma. Since it is a rare condition, I have put a discussion regarding it. Secondary cutaneous plasmacytomas in patients with multiple myeloma usually occur in late stage of the disease and reflect a high tumor burden. It means a clinical progression or deterioration of the multiple myeloma and should thus be considered as a sign of poor prognosis. Sometimes it can present as at the onset of the disease, which will help the clinician diagnose a case of multiple myeloma before it it gets worsened. And in this case of ours, chronic lymph stasis due to filariasis impaired the local immune surveillance by disrupting the trafficking of the immune competent cells in the lymphadematous limb, and thus making the lymphadematous limb immunologically vulnerable area to malignancy. Thank you.